Chapter 9 Truths and Gossip Part 2 Pandora made her departure a whole affair, dramatically saying goodbye to every single person as if she hadn't already made plans to see another show with Dorca. They would probably make Regulus go along too, seeing as he would no longer be on the tour. Sirius, unsurprisingly, played into the dramatics for Pandora's sake, falling at her feet and sobbing. He literally shed a tear, and it made Regulus wonder if he had ever fake cried on command to get something he wanted. He was better at using his emotions to play with people, to get what he wanted. He also had less control over them, something that Regulus wasn't willing to give up. Why didn't you cry for me? Pandora said, turning around on her heel after Sirius left, laughing with James as they made their way to the bus. Regulus was not paying attention to them. He smiled. I'm not sad, he told her simply. It wasn't technically the truth. He was going to greatly miss having Dorca and Pandora there. In fact, he was sort of mourning their absence already. Her jaw dropped. Don't call me when you get back to London, she said, crossing her arms over her chest. I wasn't planning on it, he lied. Pandora smiled, ruffling his hair and not initiating a hug like she wanted to. Regulus could only handle touch sometimes, and from certain people. He was too strung out to really be able to handle it, but he also didn't know the next time he would see her. He opened his arms for a small hug, and her face lit up, not pretending to be mad at him anymore, and falling into his arms for a quick hug. He never really hugged back. He didn't understand hugs in general, but Pandora never minded, and she wrapped her arms around Regulus's torso for a quick squeeze before pulling back. Oh, you're totally going to miss me. He lifted his eyebrows in amusement, not confirming or denying since they both already knew the answer. Do I get a hug too? Dorca asked, arms already open. Regulus looked at her for a moment, and then his eyes flicked to where Marlene and a couple of their people were standing, just a couple of yards away, and made his decision. Nope, her arms dropped. What? Why not? Because you are going to be back soon anyway. Dorca blushed, which Regulus thought was a little embarrassing for her. He hadn't even gotten to subtly imply anything yet. Wait, you're staying? Pandora asked, realizing Regulus's word choice even before he did. No, of course he was not staying. He just hadn't thought that far ahead to what he would be doing after he was allowed to go home. He lived alone. He was always alone, but that had never bothered him before. He had a busy life when he was dancing, so his flat was empty. And even if Evan and Batu had been serious, he couldn't just move into their place. No, I'm not. You could, Dorca said, probably having overheard something from Marlene. He shook his head. No, I can't. It's complicated. Pandora smiled. It's always with you. Sirius was looking at him. James might have stared at Regulus when he got on the bus, following him with eyes until he shut the door to his room. He didn't mean to be so obvious about everything, but now he was sure that Regulus was avoiding him on purpose. He hadn't even done anything wrong. He was pretty sure. The memories of last night were a bit fuzzy, but the general plot was there. James knew what happened. Pranks? There had never once been a time in James's life where he couldn't talk to Sirius. He told him everything, perhaps even too much at times, but there weren't any barriers between them. Not until this. He couldn't tell Sirius about this, not yet. He was scared, to put it simply. Sirius loved Regulus, but that did not mean he would approve of James wanting to love Regulus. It was different. Brotherly love versus, well, versus what James was starting to feel. Yeah? Sirius's eyes flicked to the now closed door where Regulus went immediately. Is he is he okay? Sirius had been a bit busy since Regulus's arrival, so he couldn't be blamed for not knowing. James was sure that if he would have kissed Mooney in a more adult way than their kiss when they were kids, he would be spending far too much time thinking about it as well. James thought back to yesterday, when he had seen Regulus huddled in a ball, very obviously not okay. And he thought back to last night, when they were drunk and he had shown him the article. Has Sirius seen it? James wasn't sure if it was his place to tell him, but they were brothers, and Sirius was probably better equipped to get him to talk about it than James was. There was an article, he said, lowering his voice. He couldn't very well tell Sirius that Regulus was avoiding James specifically because of the soft, cold touches at 2 in the morning. What? You should ask him about it. James? Just talk to him. That was all it took for Sirius to disappear before they even got moving, shutting the door and locking himself in the tiny room with Regulus. He would probably be mad at James for turning Sirius, but what else was new? It wasn't like Sirius was never going to find out about it. He didn't bother to get in his bunk, instead sitting next to Peter up front and resting his head. He had gotten absolutely no sleep, and he doubted he would get another chance to rest his eyes. Remus was sitting across from them, his leg bouncing up and down a bit anxiously, with such speed that James could feel it with his eyes closed. Everything all right, Mooney? Peter said. Hmm? Oh, yeah, everything's great. James would have pretended to be asleep, seeing as it was his intention to take a nap. But the tone of Remus's voice had been very obviously sarcastic, even if he hadn't meant for it to be. He knew things were weird between him and Sirius, but he hadn't seen Remus act in this way as of yet. Most of the anxiety has been on Sirius's part. He didn't know what information Peter had, but it wasn't like he was never going to find out. Remus was avoiding James's eye, which told James everything he needed to know. Any advancements? James asked him, lifting his tone of voice a little so that Remus would know this was completely casual. It wasn't, but he could pretend. Remus looked up at him, eyes more vulnerable than James had seen in years. He shook his head, a movement so small that he almost didn't catch it. Peter, always quick to catch on, sucked in a deep breath out of shock, looking between Remus and James in rapid succession. No fucking way. I fucking knew it, he said, his voice probably a bit too loud. Remus shushed him, eyes traveling to the closed door where the Black brothers were, hopefully having a heart to heart. Still, Peter said with a huff, crossing his arms. Bronx didn't believe me, but I always knew. James looked at him in confusion, trying to figure out when Peter had ever brought this up to him. What? Years ago, I told you they were soulmates, Peter explained. You did not. I did. It was after our first sold out show. James tried to remember. But honestly, that night had been incredible. They played to a crowd of 750 people in London, and people were even trying to get in after that. So, of course, he remembered that night, but not Peter mentioning anything about Remus and Sirius. He was sure that was something he would have remembered. Peter rolled his eyes. They kept looking at each other after the show, when we were all getting drunk and celebrating, remember? Remus seemed to remember at least. His cheeks were stained pink, and he was looking down at the ground. How far back did this all go? Either way, I called it. Money? James said, asking for confirmation. He pointedly did not answer, which was really all James needed. He didn't want to interject himself into the middle of their clearly very complicated relationship. It wasn't his place. That did not mean that he couldn't speed the process a little bit from the sidelines. Peter was smiling widely proud of himself. He moved to sit next to Remus, patting him on the back in a way that was meant to be more patronizing than comforting. Don't worry, Mooney. Bronx has a crush on the other one anyway. James's eyes widened in shock. Why would Peter say something like that? Peter! What the fuck? He shrugged. I'm trying to make Remus feel better. Remus was staring at him with an almost awestruck expression. No, you and he gestured his head to the room, careful not to say their names. You can tell serious, James said quickly, because really that's what he was worried about, and he absolutely hated that it was the case. He needed to either tell him or get over it. He couldn't lie about it for much longer. Not like he's talking to me much anyway, James sighed. I know the feeling. Peter was having way too much fun causing trouble. Fuck, the Black Brothers have really done a number on you two. Remus sat up straight again. Wait, you have a crush? James smiled, because despite everything, he liked the way his stomach dropped and the way he stuttered over his words around Regulus. I do. Remus cocked his head to the side, as if he were trying to figure James out. On a man? That's hardly the development I'm freaking out about, but yes, he smiled. So, that kiss when we were younger? Remus said, trailing off a little bit. James nodded. Moody, you are one handsome man, you always have been. Amen, Peter added. Remus shook his head. I cannot believe you called it kissing practice. James shrugged. Well, you went along with it, and Sirius was being a git about already having kissed a girl. I had to be on the same level. I'm not a girl. Yes, and we all ended up being gay anyway, so none of it really mattered. You used me to have the same kiss count as Sirius? Remus asked after a pause, the words just now settling in. James pressed his lips together a bit guiltily. Might have done, yeah. Sorry, Mons. Peter laughed loudly, immediately making James and Remus laugh with him. It was a miracle there were still things about each other that they didn't know, stories they had never told or only told to one other person. James liked it though. He liked that he could always learn more about his best friends. Regulus never seriously contemplated murder. At least, not until his brother came walking into the room awkwardly asking about an article. Safe to say, Regulus was considering murder now. James Potter was a dead man walking. He had never wanted to show Sirius the article because he knew that this is what would happen. He would have to talk about it, they were not good at talking, especially not to each other. Communication was not a value in the House of Black. It's not a big deal, Regulus said, eyes staying focused on the book, even if he wasn't actually reading it. Do we really have to drag this out? We don't have to talk about it at all, actually. Reggie, just talk. He shut the book, perhaps a bit too harshly, but he didn't care. It wasn't that simple for him. Regulus didn't know how to just talk. Nobody but himself needed to be subjected to his inner turmoil, especially not Sirius. Not anymore. He was the one who dealt with it before. He had years of it when they were younger. Regulus didn't do that anymore. He handled everything by himself now. He kept everything inside because it was easier than having to put it out into the world. If he talked about it, it was real. I'm not like you, serious. I don't go around talking about my feelings. Sirius didn't even blink, not at how rude Regulus was being, or at how cold and sharp his words were. Do you think it was easy for me? Yes, Regulus replied easily. Sirius had James. He had a person who was good and warm and soft, and knew how to feel things in the right way. Regulus never had that, and he used to envy Sirius for it. He used to hate him for it. There was a part of him that probably would always feel that way, jealous over everything Sirius had, and he didn't simply because he knew James. It wasn't fair, but life rarely was. I grew up in that house too. You got out. So did you, Sirius said, because he didn't know everything. Regulus technically should not fault him for it. He really thought that Regulus was free of that place and the clutches of their parents. Regulus had never told him so. The anger he exhibited over that one phrase was really very unwarranted. Fuck you! You abandoned me. You left me there and I was dying. Again, Sirius didn't waver. So was I, Reg. They were killing me. I had to leave. Regulus shook his head. It was fine when it was both of us, when I knew there was someone else going through the same things. But you left me alone in that place for years. You could have come with me, Sirius said, raising his voice. They expelled their anger in different ways. Sirius yelled and sometimes he fought, and he was very obvious about his anger. Regulus took a more subtle approach, shutting down almost completely when he was angry. No, I could not have. Yes, I asked you to. And you didn't. You stayed behind. I had no choice. There's always a choice. For you, maybe. We had the same fucking opportunities. Regulus felt all emotions leave his eyes. He felt that stone expression force its way onto his face as he stared at Sirius, feeling disbelief but never showing it. We didn't. Give me one example, Sirius demanded. It was a struggle not to shut down. Regulus knew this was a conversation that they needed to have, something they had never discussed in full before, and there were still a lot of things they both needed to say. He had never actively tried to not shut down before, though. He had never tried to stay present. Confrontation was not something he was good at. He was sure it stemmed from his childhood, always terrified he was going to get in trouble for something he had done. So he waited probably more than 2 minutes before he could even speak again. Sirius waited impatiently because he was angry with Regulus, and still because he knew about all of his issues. Regulus tended to hide in corners or little alcoves when they were kids, when he knew he had done something wrong. He broke his mother's vase once by accident. Not even one that she particularly loved, but he knew what was coming: punishment, reprimand, abuse. So he hid underneath the stairs for hours. Even though he knew she wouldn't be home until late, he stayed there all day. You were braver than me, Regulus said, because while admitting it was hard, it was easier than anything else. You knew what you wanted, and you went after it. I was always lost. Sirius ran his hands over his face, pushing his hair back. It reminded Regulus just how early it was in the morning. He could not believe they were having this conversation now. After a deep breath, okay, okay, but we're out now. You're out now. You have the time and the space to. I'm not out, Regulus interrupted. Sirius stopped, blinking in confusion. Yes, you are. I'm not. But I. Well, I thought. What are you talking about? Regulus didn't even know where to begin. It was all so complicated. He didn't live with his parents anymore. He was financially independent. He had no contact with them, but he wasn't free. He was never free from them. You left, Regulus said, deciding to start at the beginning. Reg. No, I'm not. I'm explaining. Oh, okay. Do not shut down. Just tell him what happened. Things got worse naturally. I needed a way out, but I'm not like you. I could never do it on my own. No, that's not okay. I'm really going to need you to not interrupt. Sirius promptly shut his mouth, although Regulus knew it wouldn't be the last thing he would say. He had a bad habit of interrupting, needing to say his piece the exact moment he thought of it. Regulus would never finish telling the story if that were the case. So, Mother got me signed to the London Ballet. She pulled some strings or something, I think, because they let me in months after the admission process. I mean, I was good, so I made a lot of money from sponsorships and such, so I moved out, but I didn't get out. But you moved out? Sirius asked. Yes. I don't get it. Regulus frowned, because the rest of the story would be self explanatory to most, but especially to his own brother. What do you mean? You were making your own money. You were rich by yourself. You didn't need to depend on them. You got out. That was technically all true, but did Sirius really not know? It had been all over the news when it happened. Everyone knew, regardless of whether they cared or not. Sirius, the company went down. The the company? He asked, still confused. Regulus genuinely could not believe that Sirius didn't know any of this. Really, there were probably better circumstances for him to tell him, not when they had just been arguing, but, well, now or never. Black Industries. His jaw dropped in genuine shock. Orion's company? He never called them mother and father, only used their first names, being as disrespectful as possible at all times. It used to annoy Regulus. Now he understood. Yeah. What do you mean it went down? He was caught for embezzlement and fraud. The whole company went down after that. It doesn't exist anymore. Sirius stood up, needing to walk around and expel some of his anxious energy. To be fair, this was not the scenario that Regulus wanted to be telling him all of this in. And there was still more. Holy shit. I can't believe you didn't know. Why would I know that? They are our parents. Sirius stopped walking. They literally disowned me. Regulus felt the corners of his lips quirk up because, yeah, they had done that. It was ridiculous that people even did that anymore, but they genuinely cut Sirius off in all aspects of their lives, and they had expected for Regulus to do the same. Okay, but it was all over the news. Local news? I mean, not international news. Sirius shrugged. I was probably out of the country, he said, sitting back down. What does that have to do with you, though? Nothing, technically, but there's more. How can there be more? Is Orion in jail? No, but he should be. Don't tell me you bailed him out, Sirius said, looking at Regulus with a bit of disbelief. He shrugged. Not really. I don't know. I paid for his lawyer and then they said bail and you paid for it? Well, they had no money. They are shit people, Regulus. They deserve all the bad things that happened to them. You know that, right? It was always more complicated for Regulus, and he hated that it was. They were bad people. They were horrible parents and had probably never done a kind thing a day in their life. But they were his parents. Some part of him couldn't hate them so easily. They weren't always evil, not when he and Sirius were especially young. Their dad would take them sledding, or they would go to London at Christmas time and drink hot cocoa. Their memories weren't all bad. It wasn't until they got older that the abuse started, and maybe Regulus had always clung to those happy times a bit too much. But he couldn't help it. Regulus? Yeah, no, I know that, Regulus said. Sirius took a deep breath. Regulus was trying to remain present. There was more. There was still more that Sirius didn't know and that Regulus had to tell him, because if not him, then who else? Is it too early to start drinking? Yes, Sirius said, for once being a little bit responsible. Especially for you, lightweight. I'm not lightweight, he defended, although he probably was. He didn't have the years of nights out that Sirius did to build up his tolerance to anything. We'll drink together tonight, Sirius promised, smiling a little bit. They were probably both remembering that Regulus was leaving soon. Sirius had made sure he was eating more and eating better. Regulus was, for once, letting himself have fun, and he had not injured himself any more than he already was. There was no point in him staying, counting on it. Sirius, because he was better at conversation, picked it back up. Okay, so you paid bail and you're out now, though? I'm not free of them, Sirius. I don't get it. I know, Regulus said with a small sigh. This all would have been so much easier if Sirius wouldn't have gotten himself disarmed, which Regulus didn't entirely blame him for, but he wasn't faultless. They are broke, as in they have no money, no income, nothing. You're telling me I missed the fall of the most ancient and noble house of Black? Sirius asked, always falling back into his dramatics. They never even called it that except for on party invitations. Yes, still, not our problem. Regulus didn't answer right away because he, for some reason, had decided to make it his problem. You're joking. I send them money every month, he admitted. Well, stop. It's not that simple. Why not? Look, all I do is send a check. I don't talk to them. I don't see them. None of that. It's just money. Your money, though, not theirs. Well, they used their monies to raise us. Sirius's eyes widened, and Regulus could tell he was just getting angry again. He was tired of this conversation, of going back and forth about the different moral implications. It was his money, and he could decide how he wanted to use it. Simple as that. They wouldn't even let us buy bubblegum from the shopping center. I know, but. But what? Serious. I'm listening. Do not shut down. All Regulus wanted to do was crawl inside of his own skin. He had never been more aware of every single sensation. The way his shirt was itching his back, and his hair was falling too harshly on his neck, the color of his shirt, and exactly where it brushed against his collarbones. Everything. Do not shut down. He's sick. Who's sick? Regulus knew that Sirius was not stupid. They had been raised with the same education, and Sirius, despite his best efforts to have horrible notes, was very good at school. He absorbed information like a sponge, learning things with ease. So Regulus didn't understand why he was acting so dense. Father, Orion, whatever you want to call him, he's sick. Like mentally, because I thought we already established they were both sick. He has MND. What's that? Motor neuron disease. Sirius still looked confused, and Regulus remembered that he had always been better at science. For a while, his parents had wanted him to be a surgeon, so he had taken a lot of classes in that general area in high school. They wanted Sirius to be a lawyer, so he was never subjected to all of the diseases and illnesses that Regulus was. His motor neurons are being destroyed, Regulus explained, simplifying it for him. Oh, shit, like walking and moving? Essentially, he's hospitalized right now. Can hardly move at all or speak without slurring his words. Sirius clearly did not know how to take this information, and he kept going from anger to worry to anger again. It was a lot, Regulus remembered when he found out. It was the only reason he really sent them all the money he did. And you're paying for it? He was back to being angry. Who else do you suggest pays for it? Healthcare was usually pretty cheap, but not the way Walburga insisted for it to be done. She had them run every single test, give him every single drug or experimental trial, things that were so ridiculous that insurance didn't cover it. Damn! Serious, they literally have no money. Good. Let them die with hundreds of thousands of pounds of debt. Who do you think is handed all of that debt when they die? Their next of kin, which wouldn't be us because we were disowned. You were disowned. I am not. Well, do something to get disowned then. I did. It wasn't enough. What did you do? I made out with Barty. Barty? The security? I thought he had a thing with the other one. Regulus nodded. He does. And the other one is Evan. Evan, that's it. I like them, you know. Mm, great. Really, he could care less if Sirius liked his friends. He didn't need his approval. Are they not serious? They're getting married, actually. And you made out with one of the grooms? I did, yes. Recently? Yes. Sirius kept tethering between confused and impressed, looking at Regulus as if it was the first time he was really seeing him. Regulus had never technically had to come out to Sirius. He had never really come out to anyone. It was just a thing. He realized one day he was gay and never thought about it much, at least until him and Buddy started messing around and his mother caught them. Yeah, then he started thinking about it a lot. What the fuck? It was in a friend way. You don't make out with people in a friend way. I do. I don't. Regulus gave him a look. You're telling me you've never kissed Potter? Sirius grinned at him. I have, actually. His smile dropped when he realized he seemed to prove Regulus's point. Whatever. Have you seen that man? I would platonically have his children if he asked me. Regulus did not want this to turn into a conversation about James or about making out with James. He was sure that his psyche wouldn't be able to take it. Are you blushing? Sirius asked loudly, standing up abruptly and pointing. Oh my god, you totally want to make out with him too. Nobody can resist his charm, not even you. Regulus was blushing even more now. It was the worst. Sirius ran out of the room. James had finally decided to try to sleep, closing his eyes while Remus and Peter chatted away about simple things. It was short lived when he heard Sirius yelling his name, struggling to open the door to the back room. His first thought was that maybe Regulus was trying to murder him, but then the sound of his giggles filtered through along with his voice, and the look on his face when he did open the door was nothing short of ecstatic. He pulled his headphones out, waiting for whatever Sirius was about to say to him. Reg is blushing, he said. James didn't really need any more cue than that to get as excited as Sirius. The sight of Regulus blushing was one that James admired so deeply. His cheeks could be as red as a cherry, and he would still lie to James's face and refuse to admit that he was blushing. It was adorable. Regulus would hate being called adorable, but it was the simple truth. That's fantastic, James said. Sirius came and sat next to him, one track mind and apparently not seeing the way Remus kept glancing up at him. You're blushing too. Sirius nodded. Yeah, it was hot in there. The conversation got a bit much, but that's not the point. James smiled, completely taken up by Sirius's energy in the way he always was. They fed off of each other, feeling everything that the other was in any given moment. Okay, what is the point then? He wants to kiss you, Sirius said. James had to fight to keep his face neutral. It was a challenge. Well, he blushed over the idea of it, but all the same. James could only nod, making a small noise that showed he was listening. He couldn't very well show just how pleased he was over this. Peter was clearly very intrigued, looking at James with a raised eyebrow and obviously about to start something. Wow, that is very interesting. James, what do you think of that? Peter asked. Sirius was far too caught up in his own excitement, thankfully, so he didn't seem to understand the implications of Peter's words. James did, though, and now he definitely had to find something that he would tease Peter about. He was always super quiet and secretive about literally everything, but now James had a determination. Oh, can hardly blame him. Prongs is a handsome, handsome man, Sirius said, pinching his cheeks a little bit. So, you guys talked everything out then? James asked, desperate to change the subject. The door was still open, and he was almost positive that Regulus could hear them. Sirius looked at him. No, not even close. This is a brief intermission. An intermission? Heavy atmosphere in that room, Prongs. Heavy, heavy. Intermission is necessary. Sirius had finally calmed down a little bit, relaxing into the seat and realizing that Pete and Remus were there too. The expression on his face when he saw Remus was priceless. And James really didn't know how he had never noticed before. He cleared his throat. Mooney, Wormtail, top of the morning to you too. To both of us? Peter asked, smiling devilishly. James actually liked when Peter was being a little shit so long as it wasn't directed at him. Yes? Okay, just wondering. Sirius seemed to get the implication just then, so he practically vanished back into the room with Regulus, preferring that to dealing with everything with Remus. James couldn't fault him for that. So, Prongs, Peter said, smirk on his face. Wormy, how you're feeling? Really, he felt like his heart had fallen to his feet, dropping in his chest at terminal velocity. He didn't want to get his hopes up. Most likely, Sirius was being an idiot, and Regulus had little to no interest in kissing him. But James was a fool, and his whole body was tingling. You're the one blushing now, Regulus said when Sirius came back to the room. Do not say a word. I don't think I need to. Sirius sat down next to him with a huff. I'd rather we argue again than talk about this. Regulus felt himself smiling. And by this you mean? Don't start with me, really. Still, after Sirius decided to embarrass him, Regulus thought that it was only fair that he get to do it in return. So, he stood up with every single intention to tell Remus that Sirius was blushing. Absolutely not, Sirius said, blocking the door. But I need to tell Remus you are blushing over him. You will do no such thing. Why is that? He had to think for only a moment before thinking of something. Sirius was always quick witted like that, able to think on his feet. It was why he was good at this lifestyle, good at interviews and talking to fans. Because we're talking about the article. What article? Well, that was my question, actually. Everything was too much. There was too much to tell him. He just needed a break, a moment to breathe. He needed to get off the bus and drink some water and take off the stupid fucking cast and breathe. In a couple of minutes, Regulus said, deciding then and there that he was going to fucking breathe. Sirius nodded. Okay,